Still on. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming down tonight. We are live from Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, so a message for our live stream audience at home. If at any time during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of the book, just call the number on your screen. We will have the author sign it for you, and we will have it shipped to wherever you are in the United States free of charge. This evening, Books and Books is very happy to present Mr. Suketu Mehta and his new book, Maximum City, Bombay, Lost and Found. This event is being presented in collaboration with the Center for Literature and Theater at Miami Dade College. It's one of the events related to the 2014 Big Read, which is celebrating the namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. Mr. Mehta is an associate professor of journalism at New York University. He was born in Calcutta and raised in Bombay and New York. This book won the Kiriyama Prize and the Hutch Crossword Award and was a finalist for the 2005 Pulitzer Prize, the Lettres Ulysses Prize, the BBC4 Samuel Johnson Prize, and the Guardian First Book Award. In it, Mr. Mehta gives us an insider's view of the stunning metropolis of Bombay. As each individual story unfolds, he also recounts his own efforts to make a home there after more than 20 years abroad. The book has been getting superb reviews. I have a quote here from the San Diego Union Tribune, which said, "What Dickens did for London, what Joseph Mitchell did for New York City, Suketu Mehta has done for Bombay." And the New York Times Book Review said, "Probably the best work of nonfiction to come out of India in recent years." Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Suketu Mehta.
Introduction, and thank you all for coming. The last time I was in Miami, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I wasn't really in Miami. I was out in one of these vast gated communities out in the suburbs, which really depressed me. So today I've been walking around Little Haiti and Little Havana and the hipster areas with a friend of mine who's been taking me around, and I'm just amazed at how much of a world city it is. I'd heard a little bit about it, but I didn't really know until I saw it for myself. And I'm from Bombay and New York, two great cities which are equally open to the world. So it feels part of the same progression. I'm going to read to you a little bit today about Bombay, which is the city where I grew up. I went from Bombay to New York when I was 14 to the Jackson Heights part of Queens, which, if any of you know, it's the most diverse neighborhood in the United States statistically. That one zip code that I was living in, 11372, has more languages spoken than any other place in the United States. And then 21 years later, I moved back to Bombay to see if I could go home again. So this is the book that's come out of it. There will soon be more people living in the city of Bombay than on the continent of Australia. Urbs Prima in Indus reads the plaque outside the gateway of India. It is also the Urbs Prima in Mundus, at least in one area, the first test of the vitality of a city, the number of people living in it. With 14 million people within its municipal limits, Bombay is the biggest city on the planet of a race of city dwellers. Bombay is the future of urban civilization on the planet. God help us. I left Bombay in 1977 and came back 21 years later when it had grown up to become Mumbai. 21 years, enough time for a human being to be born, get an education, be eligible to drink, get married, drink, drive, vote, go to war, and kill a man. In all that time, I hadn't lost my accent. I speak like a Bombay boy. It is how I am identified in Kanpur and Kansas. Where are you from? Searching for an answer in Paris, in London, in Manhattan. I always fall back on Bombay. Somewhere, buried beneath the wreck of its current condition, which is one of urban catastrophe, is the city that has a tight claim on my heart, a beautiful city by the sea, an island state of hope in a very old country. I went back to look for that city with a simple question: can you go home again? In the looking, I found the cities within me. Greater Bombay's population, so this is the metropolitan area, currently 20 million, is bigger than that of 173 countries in the world. If it were a country by itself in 2004, it would have ranked at number 54. Cities should be examined like countries. Each has a city culture, as countries possess a national culture. There is something peculiarly Bombayite about Bombayites, and likewise about Delhiites or New Yorkers or Parisians, the way the women walk, what their young people like to do in the evenings, what their definitions of fun and horror are. The growth of the megacity, which is a city of more than 10 million people, is an Asian phenomenon. Asia has 11 of the world's 15 biggest cities. Why do Asians like to live in cities? Maybe we like people more. India, contrary to what most people think, is not an overpopulated country. Its population density is lower than that of many other countries not thought of as overpopulated. In 1999, Belgium had a population density of 130 people per square mile. The Netherlands, 150. India, under 120. It is the cities of India that are overpopulated. Singapore has a density of 2,535 people per square mile. Berlin, which is the most crowded European city, 1,130 people per square mile. The island city of Bombay in 1990 had a density of 17,550 people per square mile. Some parts of central Bombay have a population density of 1 million people per square mile, which makes it the highest number of individuals massed together at any spot in the world. And they're not equally dispersed across the island. 2/3 of the city's residents are crowded into just 5% of the total area, while the richer or more rent-protected 1/3 monopolize the remaining 95%. "50 years ago, if you wanted to see where the action was in India, you went to the villages. They contributed 71% of net domestic product in 1950. Today, you go to the cities, which now account for 60% of net domestic product. What makes Bombay overpopulated is the impoverishment of the countryside, so that a young man with dreams in his head will take the first train to Bombay to live on the sidewalk. If you fix the problems of the villages, you fix, as a happy side effect, the problems of the villages. So I went back to Bombay to live with my family, and I found it really tough in the beginning. So I'm going to read a section about that, which is, it's called The Country of the No. Can I get a gas connection? No. Can I get a phone? No. Can I get a school for my child? I'm afraid it's not possible. Have my parcels arrived from America? I don't know. Can you find out? No. Can I get a railway reservation? No. India is the country of the no. That no is your test. You have to get past it. It is India's great wall. It keeps out foreign invaders. Pursuing it energetically and vanquishing it is your challenge. In the Guru Shishya tradition, the teacher-disciple tradition of Indian classical music, the novice is always rebuffed multiple times when he first approaches the Guru. Then the Guru stops saying no, but he doesn't say yes either. He suffers the presence of the student. When he starts acknowledging him, he assigns a series of menial tasks meant to drive him away. Only if the disciple sticks it out through all these stages of rejection and ill-treatment is he considered worthy of this sublime knowledge. India is not a tourist-friendly country. It will reveal itself to you only if you stay on against all odds. The no might never become a yes, but you will stop asking questions. Next, I thought I'd read a section which is set in the bars of Bombay. Now, when I went back to Bombay, I knew I wanted to write a book about the city and my place in it, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. This was my first book. So I just went out every day into the city and just swam in the huge sea of humanity that was the city. So I met politicians, I met wandering poets, I wrote a Bollywood movie, I wrote about Bollywood. I met a lot of politicians, gangsters, and cops. So the city in the 90s, and even now, it's a very brutal city. There's a lot of violence in the slums. In the police stations of the city, torture is routine. I sat in the back of police stations and watched people getting tortured. And then there was this one part of the city which I've never seen anywhere else. And there were a series of bars, which they call the beer bars, where in the evenings, everybody, the cops, the gangsters, everybody would come to watch these beautiful young girls dance on a stage. But they weren't strippers. They wore full saris and full dresses. And it was like a Bollywood fantasy. They danced, and men came to throw money on them and fall in love with them. And so I became friendly with two of the dancers, and they told me their stories, and also got to know some of the customers of these bars. So this section is set in the beer bars of Bombay. The chapter is called A City in Heat. Cities like Bombay live at night. And you guys in Miami might relate to this. The day is a gathering up of forces for the night. The city unfurls itself luxuriously after the sun sets in the receptions, premieres, parties, and dinners of the night, in the beer bars, hotels, dance clubs, whorehouses, and alleyways. The night has no time. It is freed from the corporate rigor of the day. And the night contains sexual possibility. That man so fine in his jacket, that woman across the room lighting a cigarette. When the crime branch people catch you, they first ask, "Who's your kept woman?" said Mohsin the hitman. Most people in this line have a mistress. Some of them end up marrying the kept woman. Only gangsters will marry them. And this is due to a common absence of honor, Mohsin says. If I don't have honor, what is her honor? The gangsters are free, like the bar girls, from the conventions and restraints of honor. At this point, his friend Anis, who lives on the fringes of the gang war, tells me about the courtship of the bar line girls. Bombay has every taste, every fetish, he begins. The city is humid with sex. But for the gang war boys, there are only the bar dancers. There are several hundred bars in Bombay, variously called beer bars or ladies' bars or dance bars. In suburbs like Chembur and Malad, there seems to be one on every block. In these bars, fully clothed young girls dance on an extravagantly decorated stage to recorded Hindi film music, and men come to watch, shower money over their heads, and fall in love. That world, which the dancers and the patrons call the bar line, is unique to Bombay. And for me, it is the intersection of everything that makes the city fascinating. Money, sex, love, death, and show business. It goes this way. A boy from the gangs might start becoming a regular at a bar. He might see a girl that he fancies. He might imagine himself protecting her from villains, or he pictures the girl nursing his wounds after a gunfight or an encounter. So he goes up to the girl on his way out and asks to see her after the bar closes. She smiles and asks him to come back tomorrow. He comes back the next evening and sits there and now watches only her among the dancers. She remembers him from the previous day, smiles once or twice at him, and he asks the waiter to garland her with 1,000 or 5,000 rupees. She dances a little faster for him in his direction. He stays till the bar closes and then asks her again for her number. She asks him to come the next night. She will be waiting for him. And so he comes again and again to the bar, throwing a little more money over her head each time, till finally, one night when he is least expecting it, she quickly thrusts a piece of paper into his hand. On it is written the magic phone number and her name. The next day he gets on the phone as soon as he wakes up, which might be 11 o'clock. There is no answer, or in the case of the more modern girls, an answering machine. All morning he calls until finally at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, a sleepy voice answers, "Hello?" And so begins the relationship on the phone. In the big anonymous city, she becomes an ear for him. She listens to his problems with his wife, his parents. She understands when his work isn't going well. She worries when he doesn't eat. "Had your lunch?" she asks him. "Yes." "What did you have?" "Oh, I don't know. A sandwich." "You call that lunch? You just eat anything, don't even take care of yourself?" "So I'm coming over and you make me lunch," he might say at his point, trying his luck. "Not today, my brother is coming. But soon I want to make you a meal with my own hands. I don't know why I feel good with you. I haven't found anyone that can understand me like you. Will you come to the bar tonight? I'll be waiting for you." And so each afternoon he talks to her on the phone. Each evening he goes to the bar. And now, when he watches her on the stage, there is an intimacy between them. Of all the people in this room, of all the people in this city, she knows secrets about him. She's the only one who has asked him that day if he's eaten. He sits behind the table stacked with his money and smokes and drinks and watches her steadily, watches the way her hips rotate to the song he keeps paying 50 rupees to the waiter to play, thinks about her lying in bed talking to him, thinks about that comment she made that she'd just come out of the bath when he called and hadn't had time to put on any clothes. Each day now he wants to meet her outside the bar. "Let's go to Kandala for a couple of days," he suggests. "No, I like you a lot, but I'm not that kind of girl. I'm not like the other girls in the bar line." He keeps coming to the bar, he keeps blowing money on her, he keeps asking her to meet him. Not yet, she demurs. What she doesn't say, what keeps him going is, "Not ever." By now, she's the centerpiece of his fantasies. He sees the way she's looking at him in the bar, different from the way she looks at everyone else. When she dances for other men, he knows she's only doing it for the money. But when she turns to him, when she comes in front of his table, it's quite clear she's doing it because she wants to. Didn't she say so herself this afternoon? One evening, he couldn't come to the bar. The boss of the gang had some work for him, and she rang him early the next afternoon and was almost crying. "Where were you? I was so worried about you. Your work is so dangerous. Always call me if you aren't going to be coming. Otherwise, the whole of last night I kept washing the door, hoping you would walk in. The other girls noticed. They kept joking with me about it. When's your boyfriend coming?" So he asked her to meet him for just a cup of coffee. And one afternoon, after he spent a lot of money the night before, after the notes showering from his hand have made her twirl in a frenzy that dazzles the entire bar, she agrees and asks him to meet her at the Hirapanna shopping center that Saturday. When he shows up, she's very happy to see him and tells him so. They stroll among the lanes of the mall, just a regular guy and his girl, just like all the other dating couples from Malabar Hill and Breach Candy. And he notices some of the men look in her direction and then look at him with envy and admiration. They walk by an electronics shop and she squeals, turns to him and says, "Oh, that's such a nice juicer. You know, the doctors asked my mom to drink fresh juice every morning." And so, gallant that he is, he will walk into the store and without asking the price, tell the clerk, "That juicer, pack it." They will go into other stores. "That's such a lovely shirt piece," she says. "It would look great on my little brother." As a reward, she might lead him into a lingerie store and get the clerk to show them their most exciting underwear. She might deliberate over the purchases, holding the bra over her shirt, the G-string over her crotch, might ask him to admire the material, giggle over her naughtiness. The clerk has seen this before many times, and he plays his part well, showing them his most expensive wares, addressing the suitor with the respect appropriate for a big man, a ladies' man. He orders Cokes for both of them, which takes some time coming, during which she keeps making more purchases so that every time the mark makes a move to go, the clerk protests, "But the cold drinks are just coming, sir." The clerk knows he's too embarrassed to ask the prices of the items he is buying, so they can be made up on the spot. the next day the girl will come back with her wispy purchases and bargain hard over splitting up the spoils. But in the meantime, the future is thinking of her in all of these items, that red lace bra, those see-through panties. He's determined that tonight he will see her in them, and then he will see her without them. The shopping expedition might have cost him over 100,000 rupees. He will have to ask the Don to send down some more money, and in return he will have to kill or beat someone for the gang. On his way out, he says to her with urgency, "After you get off work tonight, you're coming with me." This time he will not take no for an answer. This time she can see he intends to have his way, or she will lose him. He will curse her and never come to the bar again, and neither will his money. So she will finally say, "Okay, tonight." And after the bar closes, he will be waiting outside for her, and they might take a taxi to a good hotel, the Oberoi or the Taj. Or if the girl is more imaginative, if she has poetry about her, they will do what Anis the gangster tells me they have done with him. She will use the birds. "You have to go to Haji Ali to drink juice at 1 a.m., Anis says. Haji Ali is the tomb of a Sufi saint, and there's a causeway leading off the road to go to his tomb, on which there is always a line, Hindus and Muslims both, seeking the blessings of the saint. The taxi drivers touch their lips and their hearts as they drive by Haji Ali. So at 1 a.m., the future will be waiting for the bar girl in a taxi at Haji Ali, anxiously scanning every person walking toward him, every car that pulls up. She might be late. He might think she's ditched him and might start cursing her, but then finally she shows and she takes his breath away. She is so beautiful. When she gets in the taxi with him, she is dressed in a miniskirt, and he notices how smooth and fair her thighs are. He smells her perfume. She's wearing something that leaves her arms bare, or she's wearing a sari and a backless blouse. She is not smiling now. She is not meeting his eyes now. She is watching the sidewalk for something, till finally she sees him. A man with a couple of cages slung over his shoulder, filled with birds. She gives the taxi driver a 50 and tells him to take a walk, go drink some juice. She calls out to the bird seller, and he comes over. His cages have tiny songbirds fluttering about inside, with beaks of different colors. The dancer asks her man to buy some of the birds, 6 for 500 rupees. If you want more fun, take a dozen, advises Anis. And the girl rolls up all the windows of the taxi and opens the door of the cage, and all the birds fly out and fill the small dark taxi with their energy and their music. She laughs with delight and asks her man to play a game with her, catch the birds. They reach out their hands to grab the birds, who are small and quick, and they have to wave their arms wildly about even to touch them. As the girl and her ardent suitor reach out to catch a bird, they, sometimes accidentally, can't help touching each other. This is new for the man. Remember, he hasn't touched her up to this point. As the bird lands on her shoulder, he must make a grab for it, and if the bird flies off, his hand lands on her shoulder. If it should fly close to her breast, why, it is within the rules of the game that he should try his best to capture the songbird, which might just be that little bit too quick for him, and his hand, in its dart forward, might meet with something else softer. And so the whole of the tiny Fiat taxi is filled with bird song, her giggling, his laughter, and every now and then a quick gasp. And so it is that at last, at long last, the dancing girl and her patient suitor go all soft and hot in the back of the taxi, the space around them filled with fluttering and panicked songbirds. Half an hour or an hour later, the door of the taxi opens, and half a dozen or a dozen dead birds are thrown out on the road. If there are any remaining alive, they fly out over the great dark sea, free at last. So that's one of the worlds of the city. Thank you. And I'll finish with two very short sections, which are two very different sides of the city. So the first section is about these very violent Hindu-Muslim riots in the years 1992 and 93, which split the city. And I got to meet some of the Hindu nationalist rioters. What does a man look like when he's on fire? I asked Sunil. It was December 1996, and I was sitting in a high-rise apartment in Andheri, which is a Bombay suburb, with a group of men from the Hindu nationalist Shiv Sena party. They were telling me about the riots of 92-93 that followed the destruction of the Babri Masjid mosque in Ayodhya. The two other Shiv Sena men with Sunil looked at each other. Either they didn't trust me yet, or they were not drunk enough on my cognac. I wasn't there. The Sena didn't have anything to do with the rioting, one man said. Sunil would have none of this. He put down his glass and said, I'll tell you, I was there. A man on fire gets up, falls, runs for his life, falls, gets up, runs. He addressed me. You couldn't bear to see it. It is horror. Oil drips from his body. His eyes become huge, huge. The white shows. White, white. You touch his arm like this. He flicked his arm. The white shows. It shows especially on the nose. He rubbed his nose with 2 fingers as if scraping off the skin. Oil drips from him. Water drips from him. White, white, all over. Those were not days for thought, he continued. We 5 people burnt a Muslim man. At 4 a.m., after we heard of the attack on the Hindus at Radhabai Chaul, a mob assembled, the likes of which I have never seen. Ladies, gents, they picked up any weapon they could. Then we marched to the Muslim side. We met a pawwala, a bread seller, on the highway on a bicycle. I knew him. He used to sell me bread every day. Sunil held up a piece of bread from the pav bhaji he was eating. I set him on fire. We poured petrol on him and set him on fire. All I thought was, this is a Muslim. He was shaking. He was crying. I have children. I have children. I said, when your Muslims were killing the Hindus at Radhabai Chaul, did you think of your children? That day we showed them what Hindu dharma is. So that was one part of the city which made me intensely sad. It was my hometown. As I said, I sat in police stations watching people get tortured. I sat with hitmen as they told me about the men they had killed and what they looked like when they killed them. There was a lot of sadness in the city and tremendous poverty in the slums and huge inequality between rich and poor. So it seemed a riven city, split along all these lines. So I wanted to see if I could find hope in the city. And I found it in the strangest place, in the incredibly crowded commuter trains of Bombay. The manager of Bombay's suburban railway system was recently asked when the system would improve to a point where it could carry its 6 million daily passengers in comfort. Not in my lifetime, he answered. Certainly, if you commute into Bombay, you are made aware of the precise temperature of the human body as it curls around you on all sides, adjusting itself to every curve of your own. A lover's embrace was never so close. Asad bin Saif works in an institute for secularism, moving tirelessly among the slums, cataloguing numberless communal flare-ups and riots, seeing firsthand the slow destruction of the social fabric of the city. Asad is from Bhagalpur in Bihar, site not only of some of the worst communal rioting in the nation, but also of a gory incident where the police blinded a group of petty criminals with knitting needles and acid. Asad, of all people, has seen humanity at its worst. I asked him if he feels pessimistic about the human race. Not at all, he responded. Look at the hands from the trains. If you are late for work in the morning in Bombay, and you reach the station just as the train is leaving the platform, you can run up to the packed compartments and find many hands stretching out to grab you on board, unfolding outward from the train like petals. As you run alongside the train, you will be picked up, and some tiny space will be made for your feet on the edge of the open doorway. The rest is up to you. You will probably have to hang on to the door frame with your fingertips, being careful not to lean out too far lest you get decapitated by a pole placed too close to the tracks. But consider what has happened. Your fellow passengers, already packed tighter than cattle are legally allowed to be, their shirts already drenched in sweat in the badly ventilated compartment, having stood like this for hours, retain an empathy for you. Know that your boss might yell at you or cut your pay if you miss this train, and will make space where none exists to take one more person with them. And at the moment of contact, they do not know if the hand that is reaching for theirs belongs to a Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Brahmin or untouchable, or whether you were born in this city or arrived only this morning, whether you live in Malabar Hill or New York or Jogeshwari, whether you're from Bombay or Mumbai or New York. All they know is that you're trying to get to the city of gold, and that's enough. Come on board, they say. We'll adjust. Thank you. So I'm happy to take questions about this book, my next book. I think, as I said, I'm writing a book about New York City now and immigrants in New York City. So I like cities.
Yeah, I enjoyed your book tremendously. I just wondered what you think about the election that's going on now.
All right. Yes. So India is the world's biggest democracy. Is going to the polls right now, and there's around 850 million eligible Indian voters. And this time around, when Indians go to the ballot box, they'll have a choice. There'll be two pictures on the ballot. One is of the devil, the other is of the deep blue sea. It's not a happy choice. There's the Congress party, which has been in power for a decade and is incredibly corrupt, and their candidate for prime minister is a kid who should still be running around in shorts. He's not very bright, and this is according to many of my friends who met him. And his only claim to fame is that he comes from a dynasty. And on the other hand, we have a man named Narendra Modi, who's considered business-friendly and efficient. He makes the trains run on time in his home state of Gujarat. But he also was chief minister in 2002 when there was a horrific pogrom, like the one I've described in my book, exactly like that, where Muslims were set on fire for the crime of being Muslim. And he was chief minister at the time, and at the very least he was guilty of gross dereliction of duty. The police did nothing, and some 2,000 Muslims were hacked to death in front of their families. So this man now, the United States will not even give him a visa to come here. And he almost certainly will be the next Prime Minister of India. And what's happening in India is, until a few years ago, people thought India would be the superpower of the 21st century. The Indian Tourist Board had a slogan, "Incredible India." Well, I didn't believe it. And now we see that there's enormous obstacles before we can even be a power, far less a superpower. So I've written about this in my book, that it's like India wants to get to the 21st century without ever having gone through the 20th century fully. It wants to go from the 19th to the 21st century. So we have world-class engineers, and Indian Americans in this country are the richest, best educated minority in the country. I recently reviewed a terrible book by Amy Chua called The Triple Package, which is about these ethnic groups, and she has a hierarchy of ethnic groups that do well, and Indian Americans are at the top. And what I wrote was, so her argument was there's something inherent in Indian culture that makes Indian Americans superior. And I said, well, if this is true, what explains India? Now, India has made real achievements. So, 1947, we got independence after over 200 years of British colonialism. And since then, when you look at the mess that is democracy in India today, what people sometimes forget is what we've achieved, which is the greatest transfer of power in world history. So for 5,000 years, political power in India was held by the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, people on top of the caste ladder who were a minority in the country. It was a small minority that ruled over the country for all its recorded history. And it's now been some 67 years since we're a democracy, and it's permeated to every nook and cranny of the country. I mean, today it's a country that's 82% Hindu, but the Prime Minister is a Sikh, the President is a woman, the last President was a gay Muslim rocket scientist, the Chief Justice is an untouchable, the previous Chief Justice was Muslim, and the leader of the governing coalition, the most powerful person in India today, is an Italian Catholic widow. So it is a democracy, and there is an idea of India which has kept the country together. After, when it became independent, predictions were that it would become Balkanized, it would split apart. But the Balkans became Balkanized, but India stayed one country. So what's happened is that people, for the first time in history, now feel that there's been this devolution of political power. In much of Bombay, you cannot get elected if you come from the higher castes, because the castes vote en masse. And what now has to happen, and this election is about that, is that economic power has not devolved. So it used to be that all these Indians out in the villages, the people who were poor, when a son would ask his father, why are we poor, the father would say, well, it's because of sins you committed in your last birth that you are now born to this lowly state. And if you're good in this birth, then in your next birth you can be rich. And the kids aren't buying that anymore in their farms, because they're watching TV. There's a TV and internet in every village and hamlet in the country, and they're looking at the people in the cities, and they're seeing how they live, they're seeing how they dress. So what an Indian child does now in the farm is, if he feels he can't make a living on the farms, which is increasingly true because of the way world agriculture is rigged in favor of the rich countries, they'll get on the first train to Bombay or Delhi, and then they will try their luck in the big city. And in these slums, which are horrible places, I mean, they don't have indoor plumbing or toilets, or they're really awful places. I spend a lot of time in the slums. But they'll still live there, and they'll make enough money in the big city to send some money back to the village where their parents can build a house, not made of straw, but of brick and mortar. And something else that drives these kids to the cities, it's not just about money. An Indian city is where a young Indian person coming in from the farms can marry the person of their choice, where their caste matters much less. I mean, how do you practice untouchability on a Bombay commuter train, right? So it's not just about money, it's about freedom. And something else, metropolitan glamour. So I was once in a taxi, and I was speaking to the taxi driver, and he was telling me about his life in the slums, and no running water, electricity was really irregular, and I was complaining about it. And it was raining. He said his shack was flooded. Then I asked where he was from, and he said Uttar Pradesh in the north. And I said, so your farm must be even worse. He said, no, it's a great place. We've got lots of land there. My family right now, they're frying pakoras, and they're eating in the rain, and we have tons of land. I could make a nice living there. So I said, what keeps you here in Bombay? He turned around and said, Lata Mangeshkar was sitting where you are sitting in this taxi last month. Lata Mangeshkar is, if you were to put Madonna and Gloria Estefan and Lady Gaga all together in one person, she still won't add up to Lata Mangeshkar in India. She was like the most popular Bollywood singer ever. So Lata Mangeshkar had sat in his cab. And he said, I went back and I told my family, Lata Mangeshkar sat in my taxi. And they won't believe it. They said I was lying. And I realized that in the cities, for young people, this idea that you could bump into, these stars who are in your dreams at any moment, they might be walking there, they might come into your taxi or whatever, is something intangible that definitely adds to the reasons they stay on in the city. It's something economists can't measure, but it's this metropolitan glamour, this excitement. That, keeps me in New York. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I have a friend who once said a great city is a city where you can round the corner and fall in love.
Right.
But I read your book before I went to Bombay, and I tell you, it terrified me. I was really scared to go. And then when I got there and I walked around, I felt pretty safe, especially even at night. And people told me that was justified, and this might have been civic pride, but they said you're less likely to get mugged in Bombay than in Delhi. That it really is a fairly safe city for the average citizen and tourist.
Absolutely. So, I sometimes get emails from people saying, Dear Mr. Mehta, I have always wanted to travel to Bombay, then I read your book. So, I think I've invented a new kind of travel literature. It's the anti-travel literature, the kind of armchair literature that makes you stay in your armchair. No, but I've written about organized crime in my book, and so these hitmen that I met and so forth. But there's also a section in which I talk about this couple that their car breaks down outside a slum, and that all the slum dwellers come out of the slum and they're terrified. But the slum dweller says, you can go home. We'll look after your car, and they had no choice. So they went back to the rich part of the city. The next day when they came, they found the car had been untouched. The slum dwellers had set up a delegation to look after their car all night. So absolutely, Bombay is, most of us will not get mugged. They're not Latin American cities. I just got held up at gunpoint in Sao Paulo. I've been going around the favelas of Rio, and I wrote about it in the New York Review of Books last summer. You don't have that kind of everyday street crime in Bombay. The time I was writing this book, the crime was organized crime, and people were afraid of extortion. So if they bought a new car, they might get a phone call from the gang saying, nice car you have, and what's in it for us? We need a percentage. Or if anyone who bought a new flat. And the reason for that is, the judiciary, the Indian judiciary is in a shambles. So the gangs function as an alternative judiciary. If you have a flat and someone's moved into it, if you're renting out the flat and your tenant won't leave, there is nothing you can do. If you go to the courts, it'll take you 20 years before you get a hearing. And even then, I know of people who've been fighting court cases for generations, especially over property. So what a lot of people do is they go to the underworld, and then the underworld has its own systems of justice, which I've documented in my book. So it's a great city to visit, and you could actually walk into the slums. There's tremendous solidarity networks in the slums where poor people look after each other. And the slums aren't, what you would think if you just looked at them without knowing the background of the slum. 60% of the 20 million people of Bombay live in slums. But what? 60%, so yeah. So what is a slum? You and me don't like it, so we call it a slum. Slums can be these complete shacks, like just a simple sheet of plastic over some sticks, or it can be brick and mortar but informal housing. So kind of things that the city hasn't planned for, things that the poor have built for themselves. And doctors, lawyers, judges live in these slums just because there's a housing crisis. So it's actually, these megacities of our world, like Bombay, like Lagos, like Sao Paulo, they're fascinating to look at the various social dynamics that make them what they are. And I've been doing a lot of this kind of traveling around cities since my book came out to see what works and what doesn't work in cities. So, yes.
When I've read about Gandhi, I was really interested to read that he and the other leaders of the independence movement called for doing away with a lot of the caste system, and I was really what I wondered about, because I didn't get this from what I read. I mean, what was the reaction from the higher caste in the Indians when he was talking about this?
They were not happy. When Gandhi he came back from South Africa, and yes, he wanted to eradicate untouchability. So there are 4 high castes, and then there are these people who are out of the caste system altogether. So Gandhi came back, and he had good intentions. He gave the untouchables another name. He called them Harijans, children of God. And they didn't quite like this because they were like, what's everyone else, the children of devils? But he came at it from a high caste perspective. And later on, there was another man named Ambedkar who actually wrote the Indian Constitution. And he's the person who really took on untouchability full on. And the preferred name is Dalits, which are the oppressed. So, and these form numerically, the Dalits and the lower castes form a numerical majority of the country. So when this first started happening with Gandhi, he would do this personally. He would bring people into his ashram, the untouchables, and personally feed them and take care of them when they were sick. He would do more than touch, he would nurse them. So this was a big scandal when it happened. But Gandhi was held in such admiration across the country, even by the higher caste, the merchants, that he broke the dam, but he didn't go far enough. After him, there were other people that came and are dealing with caste. But actually, speaking of Gandhi, there's this whole traffic of ideas between the United States and India when it comes to things like civil rights, which is, I once started thinking about it, and I'm writing an essay about it. But in the early 19th century, the Bhagavad Gita, the great Hindu book of philosophy, it comes from the Mahabharata. It started getting translated and making its way to the New England transcendentalists. And a young American school teacher who had built a cabin by the side of a pond named Walden started reading the Bhagavad Gita every morning. And the Gita's message is, do your duty even when it is difficult. That's even what you have to focus on is doing your duty. So Thoreau protested the Spanish-American War by not paying the poll tax and spent a night in jail. And he came out of jail and he wrote a slim tract called On the Duty of Civil Disobedience, inspired by his readings of the Bhagavad Gita. So a few decades go by, and a young Indian lawyer is thrown off a train in South Africa because he's in the first class compartment, but he has brown skin. So he's thrown out and he's agitated, and he wants to lead a movement to liberate his people in South Africa. And he doesn't know what he should do. Should he launch a violent revolution? And then somebody gives this young lawyer a copy of Thoreau's book on the duty of civil disobedience. He reads it, it fires his brain, and the man later known as Mahatma Gandhi launches Satyagraha, first in South Africa and then in India. A few more decades go by, and a young African-American preacher in the South is looking for an ethical philosophy to win civil rights for his people. And Bayard Rustin and Howard Thurman told the young Martin Luther King about Gandhi. Martin Luther King traveled to India to study with the disciples of Gandhi in the 1950s. And King once said, "To other countries I go as a tourist, to India I come as a pilgrim." And he uses satyagraha as the basis of the nonviolent campaign for American civil rights. And later on, the Indian Dalits, inspired by Martin Luther King's struggle, launched their own movement. So it's like this ping-pong game of ideas between the country of my birth and the country of my nationality. There's great minds in dialogue where, as Whitman says, distance avails not, time avails not. It's a beautiful thought. So, one last question, anyone else?
Any more questions then? All right, thank you, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so a quick reminder for our internet audience at home that you could still have time to call the number on your screen, purchase a copy of Maximum City. We will have Mr. Mehta sign it for you, and we will ship it to wherever you are in the United States free of charge. Also, all of our live-streamed events are archived. So you can visit the Books and Books website, go to the link to UA Media, and any author appearance that's been broadcast from here at the store will be saved there for you to watch at your convenience. A reminder that this presentation is in collaboration with the Center for Literature and Theater at Miami Dade College. It's in relation to the Big Read. So we have the namesake Jhumpa Lahiri there on the table. Those are free to be distributed. For those of you here in the house, we have the books for sale at the counter. Mr. Mehta will be signing here at the table to the left of the podium. And that was such a fascinating presentation. Why don't we please give him another hand?